ask Brother Jimmy to come forward and to give us words of exhortation.
Good morning, everybody. I want us to start off by thinking of a house, like the actual building of a house. And there are many things that go into the construction of a house. I'm by no means a builder, but I know that there's foundations and there's walls and there's windows, there's doors, there's the roof, there's the plumbing, the gas and the electrics. But what is it that makes a house a home? Is it maybe the fancy kitchen that it might have? Is it the number of bedrooms that it might have? Is it maybe having a main bedroom with a nice ensuite? Or is it having a double garage or a big backyard? Is it having fancy couches? Or maybe it's having a really pretty front lawn with perfectly manicured bushes and shrubs. I've been looking after Ella on Fridays, and we often go for a walk. And we end up walking past this house as we walk to the local shops, and it always makes me laugh because it has this amazing green lawn. But the thing that makes me laugh is that it has about 7 of these bushes that are round, and they're thick, and they're perfectly manicured to be disc shapes with a slightly slanting top. But to me, it just looks like a UFO. But I don't think any of these things are what actually makes a house a home. What makes a house a home is maybe the most humble of all things. It is the insulation, isn't it? We call them pink bats in New Zealand. They hold in the warmth in winter. They keep out the heat in summer. They're humble. They don't look pretty. They're just sort of soft and squishy. They aren't expensive. They aren't bold. They aren't sparkly. They aren't show-offy. They can't even be seen normally. But yet, they have a huge influence on the house. As mentioned, they make it warm and cosy. They keep out the cold. And in summer, they make it cool and refreshing. It is these pink bats that make a house a home. And the ecclesia of God is a house, isn't it? We are the house of the living God. The bride and ecclesia, all of us, wherever we are today, we are a house. And we need to ask ourselves, what are the pink bats in our house that make our house a home? Is it having a fancy hall? Is it having enthusiastic speakers? Is it having great organists? Is it having a perfectly manicured front lawn? Is it having comfy chairs or a fancy sign? It is, of course, none of these things. The pink bats at Brighton, they represent something that is patient, something that is kind, something that does not envy or boast, something that is not arrogant or rude, something that doesn't insist on getting its own way, something that is not irritable or resentful, something that does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but instead rejoices in truth. It bears all things, it believes all things, it hopes all things, it endures all things, and it does not end. It is, of course, love, isn't it? The pink bats at Brighton is the love that we all share for each other, the love that we share for the Word of God, the love that we share for the hope of a future. It is love that brings warmth during times of sorrow. It is love that brings strength during times of trial. It is love that helps protect from bad influences around us. It is love that celebrates during the good times. It is love that rejoices with you and love that encourages you through your day. Love is the glue that sticks us all together. Love is the pink bats at Brighton, and it is what makes Brighton's house a home. Before we go further, I wanted to say that I didn't choose this topic because I don't think there's enough love at Brighton, but instead I chose it because during the last 4 months, while we haven't really been able to see each other much, Hannah, Ella and I have felt the love of Brighton greatly. And I'm not here to sort of blow the trumpets of any people that I might mention during this morning, but I'm here to instead celebrate something that we all have and that we all share together. So, what is love? Well, love, it is simply an emotion, isn't it? It is simply having a deep affection for someone or something. And love, being an emotion, it can come in many different shapes and sizes. Unfortunately, though, in the English language, we don't really have enough words to cover the range of love emotions that we have. For example, we might say that we love pork belly, but surely that emotion that we are feeling when we say that is different to the emotion we are feeling when we say that we love a spouse, parent, child, or friend. And while love is an emotion, it is also an action. The pink bats, they need to be put in the walls. They need to be put in the roof and the ceiling. Oh, the roof is the ceiling. The roof and the floor, I should say. And as the saying goes, actions speak louder than words. So in our Exhort today, we're simply going to have a look at the practical ways that Brighton has shown love over the 4 months of this year. And we want to, of course, encourage that continual building up of love in the ecclesia. And to do this, we're simply going to consider what is commonly known as the 5 languages of love. Words of affirmation, quality time, giving of gifts, acts of service, and touch. So, John 21, we know the words well. Jesus said, "Simon, son of Jonas, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord, you know I am your friend," says Peter. "Feed my sheep." 3 times Jesus asked, and the 3rd time was the exception. Jesus said, "Simon, son of Jonas, are you my friend?" "Lord, you know that I am your friend. Feed my sheep." While actions speak 1,000 words, sometimes people can't simply read each other's minds, and therefore words are also very important. A word of affirmation is simply expressing in words to each other the love that you have for them, or that you appreciate them, or that you simply care for them. And I'm sure Jesus could read Peter's mind, but Jesus did want Peter to say that he loved him. But Peter was not comfortable in saying this. What held Peter back? Well, it's not a discussion for right now, maybe a discussion for a different time, but we should ask ourselves, what holds ourselves back from expressing our love or appreciation for each other? And there are many things that could stop us from telling each other. I guess there are many reasons that are holding us back, if they do. But these are 2 possible reasons that I thought up before. So one reason could be our pride. I guess among men especially, it's not common for friends to tell each other that they love them, or even sometimes that they appreciate them. It isn't really considered a manly thing, is it? It can make you feel vulnerable, or maybe you might believe that others will think that you're a bit weird in saying it. As men, as a community, as a family of Christ, we need to put these perceptions aside. Paul tells us that love is not proud. Paul tells us that love puts others before its own pride. I love Shem for his willingness to serve the ecclesia. I love Uncle Royce for his ability to always be here on time. I love Alex Sanderson because he always has a smile on his face. So maybe a challenge this week for us all, especially us men, is to go and tell 3 other people besides our wives or parents why we appreciate or love them. Another reason that might be holding us back is our guilt. Maybe we're too afraid to tell someone that we love or appreciate them because maybe they've hurt us or wronged us in the past. Or maybe we feel we cannot tell someone we appreciate or love them because maybe we have wronged them or hurt them in the past. Either way, we must again remember the words of Paul. Love does not remember wrongs done against it. Reunification with those that we've lost or that we've got off on the wrong foot with are the first steps to friendship, appreciation, and love. And the only way to make these first steps is with our own words. As I said, over the last 4 months, Hannah, Ella, and I have felt the love of Brighton greatly. And I just wanted to share one short example. I thought it was very kind and thoughtful about a month ago after I'd done a Bible class on Ezekiel. Auntie Lorna simply called up, and I know I didn't answer the phone because it went to my answer phone, and she said thank you. She simply said thank you for your words of the Bible class. It's amazing that even during lockdown, even during the times that we've experienced over the last 4 months, that we can still feel the love of the ecclesia around us. And so let us continue to put those pink bats in our ecclesial home by telling each other that we love them, that we appreciate them, and that they mean something to us. The second of the 5 languages is quality time. And quality time together is time with no distractions. It is time where people can come together to simply talk. It is time where you can just be with each other. It is time where time does not matter, where there's nothing to rush off to, but instead it is time to just be. And I think 1 Samuel 20 is a good example of this. 1 Samuel 20, David is fearing for his life, and Saul is keen for his death. Jonathan has found David and is discussing this matter. But David is worried, isn't he? And when you read the text, it is almost like he is absolutely freaking out, and it's understandable. He is having a massive panic attack, and he's in deep distress, to the point where it's almost like he can't even listen to the words of Jonathan. It's like he's not quite hearing what Jonathan is telling him. If you look in verse 8, David is wondering why Saul wants him dead and says to Jonathan, "If I am guilty, kill me yourself. There is no point taking me to your father." And Jonathan says, "Do not have such a thought. If my father was going to kill you, I would tell you." And then David says to that, "Who will tell me if your father says bad things against me?" It's interesting because, Jonathan had literally just said to David that he would tell him if Saul was going to hurt him. Yet it is like David is either doubting Jonathan, or maybe, as I said, maybe he's just in so much distress that he can't have a clear mind to be able to absorb the information. And what I find interesting, what I want to point out is that after this, instead of rebutting David again, Jonathan decides that it is time to take David away. And in verse 11, Jonathan says to David, "Come, let us go out into this field." And the two of them went out together into the field, and it is in this field where Jonathan gets David to understand that he is going to tell him. It is like Jonathan recognises the high level of stress and anxiety in the current situation, and he decides that they need to go for a walk. They need to get away from distractions. They need to have a change of scenery where they can spend some quality time together. And as we said, it's during this walk, it's after they've gone out into the field, that Jonathan was able to assure David that he would not betray him, and indeed he would tell him of Saul's intentions. And I'm sure everyone here has been able to, or has been at some point on one of those long walks with a parent or a sibling or a friend where you just have a really heart-to-heart moment, a really deep and meaningful conversation. I don't know if it's the fresh air or the exercise, but walks are a great tool for a quality heart-to-heart conversation. I remember the great conversations that we had on a walk. I don't think it was last year. I've got in my notes it was last year, but I think it was the year before at the ecclesial camp when we went on that big walk together. It was fantastic. We had great conversations. Obviously, in lockdown, we haven't been able to do this as much. In New Zealand, actually, the lockdown has been a lot more harsh, and they haven't been able to even leave their suburb. My mum and my sister were thankfully in the same suburb, so they were able to go on walks together. They couldn't walk with each other because they weren't in the same bubble, they didn't live under the same roof. But they would go on walks where they would walk on either side of the road or about 10 metres apart on the same side. And they caught each other on their cell phones, their mobile phones, as they walked along and spoke that way. With no ecclesial camp, no ecclesial outings, no events at the hall, at least for some of the time in the last 4 months, I feel this surely must have been one of the hardest aspects of love to achieve as an ecclesia. However, again, I think it's something that has been done quite well. The Bible readings group set up on Tuesday night was a great initiative to provide a platform where the ecclesia can get together to chat. There's the sisters group WhatsApp group. There's the playgroup WhatsApp group. There's creative ways that Sunday school has been done, and BYG. These are just some of the tools that have been arranged to ensure that we're able to spend some quality time with each other. We're obviously now back at the hall, which is absolutely fantastic, isn't it? Where we can have face-to-face quality time. Brighton is obviously a big ecclesia, and so there is a challenge for every one of us. The challenge is to spend quality time with someone that maybe we haven't spoken to in a while. Maybe it's someone that we don't normally spend lots of quality time with. And if we go back to the pink bats analogy, insulation is only as good as its thinnest or weakest spot. If there's a part of the ceiling with no insulation, then that warmth, the love in the home will escape out of that gap. So the challenge for us all, especially as the restrictions are weakening, is to invite people over to our homes where we can, to speak to people that we haven't spoken to in a while, and simply to spend lots of good quality time together while we can. The next love language is receiving gifts. A gift is something given willingly to someone without payment. A gift is sacrificing some of one's own goods to give it freely to another. Giving gifts is making a sacrifice, and it's a fantastic way to show that you care about someone else. A gift shows that you've thought about someone else. A gift is something tangible. It doesn't have to be big. It was actually quite funny. So we recently celebrated Ella's first birthday last weekend, I think it was, and we encouraged her to open her presents. And it was funny because she wasn't interested in the presents. She wasn't interested in the cards. The biggest gift to her was the envelopes. The envelopes that those cards came in, and she would just sit there and munch on it. And if you tried to take it off her, it was like the end of the world. And it really goes to show the point that the biggest gifts that we can give are the little things. We can send birthday cards to each other. We can make food for those going through tough times. We can pray for each other. We can send encouraging words or encouraging quotes and messages to each other. When we give gifts, we must also remember to do it with the right attitude. Paul, again, he writes to us in 2 Corinthians 9, in the context of giving. He says, "Let everyone give according to his own heart, but don't do it grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver." And again, over the last 3 months, Hannah, Ella and I have felt the love of the ecclesia in this way. We received a lovely note and bag of lollies from Auntie Ruth saying, "I haven't seen Ella in the lolly line yet, but she's growing up so fast." We received some really amazing woolen socks from the Atkins and some cookies. And they couldn't have come at a better time because we were about to head to Clare, where the weather forecast was bitterly cold. We received a card from the Barnes. We received a card from the Lukes and some other things as well. And it is these little gifts that really make people feel the warmth and love at Brighton. We can't speak of gifts without speaking of the gift that Christ has provided. There is no greater gift than this, that he laid down his life for his friends. And there is, of course, no payment that mankind can make to pay for this gift. What we can do, though, is be inspired by this gift. We can be inspired by Christ's example. We can make an effort to send cards to one another, sending meals or other small gifts. And I think this pandemic has really shown that we don't need to wait for an excuse. We don't need to wait for a birthday. We don't need to wait for an anniversary. We can give gifts because we simply love each other. We love the ecclesia. I know I'm definitely not very good in the gift-giving department, so if you're like me, maybe we should make a challenge to ourselves to give someone a gift, say twice a week for the next month. And, of course, as we come out of lockdown, let us as an ecclesia continue to insulate the walls with pink bats by giving gifts with love. The next love language is acts of service. And the Apostle Paul writes in 1 Peter 4, "And above all things, have fervent love among yourselves, for love shall cover up the multitude of sins. Use hospitality to one another without grudgingly. Everyone has a gift. Use it for one another's benefit, as good stewards of the manifold grace of God." Christ's sacrifice was obviously an act of service as well as a gift. Another example of an act of service in the Bible, though, is Queen Esther. Queen Esther, the woman who endangered her own life to save the life of her people. When the Jews were backed up against that wall, Queen Esther didn't think, "I'm the queen, I'll be fine." Instead, she writes to Mordecai saying, "I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Esther could have been sentenced to death, couldn't she? But in an act of love, in an act of selflessness, in an act of service for her people, she volunteered to go and speak to the king, asking for protection for her people. A gift of love is giving something to someone, and an act of service is doing something for someone. Everyone has something that they enjoy doing. Everyone is good at something, and therefore everyone can give something to their ecclesia family. We've obviously been using the analogy of a house thus far, but the acts of service, the analogy of the ecclesia as a body, is actually probably a much better fit. Paul writes in Ephesians 4, "Do not be like children tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine, but instead we are to speak the truth in love. We are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held fitly together by every joint which makes it equipped, with which it is equipped. And every part is working properly. When every part is working properly, it makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love." The Brighton Ecclesia is made up of many people that make up this body, many people from many different backgrounds. And while some may see that as a disadvantage, some other people might see that as a disadvantage, it is actually really the beauty of what an ecclesia is. There are builders, there are accountants, engineers, teachers, managers, mums, dads, grandparents and children. And this broad background really provides a solid set of skills that can be used to put can be used in the work of the ecclesia. We have people that are good organisers. We have people that are great Sunday school teachers, fantastic preachers, splendid pianists, speakers, great carers, hospitality providers, encouragers, motivators, people to look after the accounts, audio and technical experts, and the list could go on. I remember the first lecture that I went to at Brighton. It was ages ago now. It was the summer before I actually moved over here. And I remember sitting just at the back down here where the barns are. And ashamedly, I don't remember what the topic was on or what the speaker, who the speaker was. I remember thinking how hungry I was because I was wondering why lectures were at dinner time. And as soon as the lecture finished, though, the amazing thing was that out of nowhere, this plate of supper appeared. I don't even remember who the child was that brought it to me. It just appeared out of thin air, seemingly. And I just thought that it was amazing how the children brought around supper around to the adults, and I couldn't believe it because not to insult Wellington or put Wellington down, but I remember suppers at Wellington sometimes felt like the children were like an adorable flock of starving seagulls that would just gobble it all up. And, you know, these acts of service at Brighton, they've been amazing over the last 4 months, haven't they? We've had the ecclesia, obviously, the whole environment changed, and the AB's and Dan Maluga's work in arranging things during lockdown were amazing. And James Taylor setting up all the editing and the videos and the streaming was amazing. There's the people that have arranged the Tuesday seminars and kept in touch with the friends, even though they couldn't come to the hall. There are those that have looked after the elderly to ensure that they have everything that they need to stream. And there's also just been the ecclesia as a whole, who have persevered while things were organised online. And everyone kept up the effort to keep in touch with each other during the lockdown periods. And these are all amazing acts of service and acts of love. Paul in Galatians 5, when addressing the debate around circumcision and the law, he says, "We are called to freedom, but do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but instead, through love, serve one another." And it's been amazing to see this over the last 4 months. I guess, again, maybe one challenge for us all is to think of 3 ways that we can serve the ecclesia over the coming months as we come out of lockdown, God willing. Serving one another will ensure that our house is insulated with those pink bats and will bring warmth and love to the ecclesial family. The final love language is touch, a handshake, a hug, a high five, a fist pump, an arm of encouragement and support. Touch is really one of the main human senses, isn't it? It employs the largest organ of the body. It employs our skin. And I think in Genesis 33, the reunification of Esau and Jacob is a fantastic example of this language in action. And we know the story well, so Jacob flees after taking the birthright from Esau. He fears his return, doesn't he? He's absolutely terrified. But in Genesis 33, we are told what happens. As Jacob approaches, he bows down 7 times. And as he does this, Esau comes running over to him. And in verse 4, it says that Esau embraced him, fell on his neck and kissed him, and they both wept. They had spent about 20 years apart, and their departing was full of angry emotions. Their reunification was just as emotional, you can imagine, but the emotions were of happiness, joy, and love. I guess COVID-19, again, it has kept us apart. It has kept us away from the hall for a short time. And what it has certainly done, it has put a stop to all handshakes, to all hugs, to all high fives, to all fist pumps and arms of encouragement and support. We can no longer shake hands when we meet at the door. We can no longer hug our loved ones. For the safety of not just ourselves and our ecclesia, but also the wider community, we have to instead revert to elbow taps and standing 1.5 metres apart. So how then can we show this love in this language to each other? I guess at the moment there are probably two ways that we can do that. Firstly, for the safety of our loved ones, we can refrain from doing those things until we're told otherwise. And instead we can continually pray that that day will soon come. And Paul tells us that love takes no pleasure in wrongdoing, but is instead never tired of waiting. He also writes that love takes no thought for itself, but instead bears and endures all things. And finally, he writes that love hopes all things. So we should refrain from doing what we shouldn't do by, handshaking, but instead pray and wait for the time where we can. Until the restrictions are lifted, the second action that we can do is to embrace the spirit and the meaning of those physical actions that we would normally do. We can no longer shake people's hands, but by all means we can greet them with a truckload of enthusiasm. We can no longer give people high fives or fist pumps, but we can congratulate and celebrate with them with great vigour. We can no longer offer an arm of encouragement and strength, but instead we can encourage and strengthen them in sincerity and truth. And by doing this, we can pray that we can touch each other's hearts instead. I was dormant about a month ago and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Being apart has really made coming back together something even more special, hasn't it? The enthusiasm and the eagerness and the excitement of everyone who walked through that door, it was absolutely infectious. And the elbow taps were wholeheartedly done, if not a little bit clumsily sometimes. And everyone loved being there. And I'm sure every week since has been the same, especially as the numbers have now increased and we can now stand to sing, which is absolutely fantastic. The enthusiasm shown by all has really showed that the pink bats at Brighton are really there and that the love that everyone has in seeing each other is really there. So, as we kind of come to a conclusion together then, as we remember the life, death and resurrection of Jesus, let us consider the love that he showed to not only those around him, but to those that he hadn't even met yet. Jesus, he showed love to his Father by going about his Father's business even from a young age. Jesus showed love to the multitudes coming to hear him by providing them with fish and bread when they were hungry. Jesus had compassion on the crowds that he saw in Matthew 14, and so he healed their sick. Jesus showed love to Lazarus and his family by raising him from the dead. Jesus showed love by preaching to those around him, and Jesus clearly showed love by living a sinless life and sacrificing himself for the sins of the people he had not even met yet, like ourselves. So let us consider this as we take the emblems today and throughout the next week. And let us, as the Sunday school song goes, love one another as Jesus loved you. Try to show kindness in all that we do. Be gentle and loving in deed and in thought, for these are the things that Jesus taught.